Welcome to Your Daily Devotional with me, PMV. One of the characteristics or attributes that we see of God throughout Scripture is that God is faithful. He keeps His word. He remains true. He endures. He never changes. God is faithful. Also, based upon who He is, He calls us as His children to reflect Him. He calls us to faithfulness. Today we will look at Jesus' specific message to the church at Philadelphia. The city of Philadelphia was located about 30 miles southeast of Sardis and was founded by the king of Pergamos. His deep devotion to his brother led him to give it the name Philadelphia, or brotherly love. It was also located along a major Roman trade line to the east. So thus it was also called the gateway to the east. It was also called Little Athens. This is because of the many temples to Greek gods and Roman emperors. Philadelphia was devastated by the same earthquake that struck Sardis in AD 17. In fact, Philadelphia was located on a geological fault line, not a good thing, that made the city very prone to earthquakes, to such a degree that people got tired of the constant building collapses, and many of them left the city to go live in the surrounding countryside. Revelation chapter 3, verse 7 reads, "And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these things says he who is holy, he who is true, he who has the keys of David, he who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens." Okay, as with each of the churches in Revelation chapters 2 through 3, Jesus introduces himself to the church at Philadelphia in a very specific way. First, Jesus is holy. Holy means to be separated or completely other than. God is holy. He calls His people to holiness, to remain unspotted by the world. As we have already seen, the church at Sardis failed in holiness, but the church at Philadelphia maintained holiness. Jesus, as holy God, was pleased with His church in Philadelphia. Second, Revelation chapter 3, verse 7 says Jesus is true. Now we know from John 14:6 that Jesus Himself is the way, the truth, and the life. And the church at Philadelphia had a proven true witness of Jesus, even despite persecution. Jesus was pleased with His true church. Third, verse 7 says Jesus has the key of David. The rest of the verse expands on what this key thing means, saying, he who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. Now the imagery of a key and a key holder controlling what is open and what is shut, specifically over David's house, this is drawn from Isaiah chapter 22, verse 22. Assyria had invaded Judah, and their leaders were not calling on them to trust God, but to look for help from the other nations around them. One of these wicked leaders was called Shebna. He was using his position, in fact, for personal gain. God called for Shebna to be removed from his position and for faithful Eliakim to be put in his place. Listen to Isaiah 22, verse 22. "The key of the house of David I will lay on his shoulder. So he shall open, and no one shall shut, and he shall shut, and no one shall open." If you look at the larger story of Eliakim, you will see that he was a type of Christ in the Old Testament, pointing to the faithfulness of Jesus, who would come and one day hold the keys. But what's the deal with the keys, and specifically with the house of David? Well, here, keys are used as a metaphor for complete control over a royal household. David was the great king of Israel, and so to say that you have the keys of David is to say that you have control over the whole nation of Israel, God's people. So moving back to Revelation chapter 3, verse 7, Jesus is holy, He is true, and He has authority over the nations. Specifically, He is in control over the lives of the believers in Philadelphia. Revelation chapter 3 verse 8 reads, I know your works. See, I have set before you an open door, and no one can shut it. For you have a little strength, have kept my word, and have not denied my name. Jesus knew the church at Philadelphia, and he knew their works. In knowing them, he praised them. He found them faithful. Philadelphia and Smyrna were the only two of the 7 churches that were not rebuked by Jesus, and they both suffered severe persecution. Second, in verse 8, he said, See, I have set before you an open door, and no one can shut it. In the New Testament, an open door is another metaphor. It's a metaphor for a ministry opportunity, such as sharing the gospel. For example, Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 16:9, For a great and effective door has opened to me, and there are many adversaries. Jesus opened a door for ministry to the church at Philadelphia, and he said no one could shut it. He also began with the word see. In other words, Jesus was saying, look, do you see the door of ministry I have set before you? Get to it. I will keep it open. Lastly, the back half of verse 8 reads, For you have little strength, have kept my word, and have not denied my name. Look, the church at Philadelphia was not known to be large or influential. They had little strength, but what they did have was faithfulness. They persevered in what Jesus called them to do. Notice what they did. They kept His word. They had not denied His name. These are two big things. To have Jesus say that you've kept His word is huge. To have Jesus say, good job, you've not denied me, this is a massive thing. Okay, moving on to verse 9. Indeed, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie, I will make them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. Wow, what a strong verse. Okay, so who's the synagogue of Satan? What's going on here? Well, Osborne explains it this way. These Jews claim to be God's people, but since they have rejected His Messiah and persecuted His people, they are not His true people, but rather belong to Satan. As Paul said in Romans 2, verses 28 and 29, the true Jew is one inwardly of the heart. So what was going on was the church in Philadelphia was persecuted by the Jewish population in that city. They saw these Christians as people that needed to be stomped out. They saw them as a perversion of Judaism. But what did Jesus say He would do about it? Well, look at the back half of verse 9. I will come and make them worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. Okay, in essence, what Jesus was saying is He's telling the church that He would vindicate them. Their oppressors would bow before them. But there's one problem in this verse. The Greek word that is translated here sometimes as worship really should be translated as bow. This is a picture of submission, not worship in the sense that worship is due God. I think the word that is translated here as worship, it kind of creates some confusion. To help us understand this concept better, we can look at Isaiah chapter 60, verse 14. I believe Isaiah 60:14 is what Jesus was alluding to in Revelation 3:9. Isaiah 60:14 reads, Also the sons of those who afflicted you shall come bowing to you, and all those who despised you shall fall prostrate at the soles of your feet, and they shall call you the city of the Lord, Zion of the Holy One of Israel. Okay, get this. God told His people in Isaiah that the Gentile nations who afflicted them would one day come and bow before them, the Jews, in submission. I believe Jesus took this verse and flipped it in His message to Philadelphia. The Jews who persecuted the believers, largely Gentiles, in the church at Philadelphia, these Jews would one day come and bow before them in submission. So what was the point of Jesus telling them such a thing? Well, He was encouraging them to persevere in the midst of great injustice and trials because their story wasn't finished yet. They still had an open door for ministry. The end that God had planned, the end that God had planned for them, for us, is glorious. Next time we will look at the last part of verse 9 and conclude Jesus' message to the church at Philadelphia. Thanks for joining me today. For more information, go to pnvministries.org. And as always, I hope you have a great day.